Hello everyone. Well, guess I better get on that update video. So let's get started. I feel like I've said that the exact same way in a lot of videos that I've made. Man, I don't want to go through the effort of finding each one how it started and then creating a compilation or one of those videos where you play all of them at the exact same time and you just hear me say the same thing in the exact same intonation. That would be weird. Well, anywho, let's continue. So, today was, well, I have to say it was a really interesting day, and I'll get into that. When I woke up this morning, I got up out of my bed, and my mom greeted me, and I greeted my sister, and I got a drink of water, and I always do this every morning. Like, I get really dehydrated when I don't drink a lot of water, so I'm like, I need my water. So, had that. And then my mom came up, and she asked me if I was hungry and if I wanted breakfast. I was like, sure, why not? So she said, well, I'll make some waffles. I'm gonna need your help. So I was like, of course. So I grabbed the waffle iron, and then I also grabbed some frozen blueberries because she asked for some blueberries. And she made some waffles for me and her and our family friend. She asked my sister, she declined. And we had the waffles. She used Bisquick. Bisquick is fine when you're in a pinch, but I would always prefer making my own from scratch waffle batter. I just think you ultimately get a more pleasant texture and taste when you do that. But it was still very good. After we had our delicious waffles with butter and maple syrup, I remember I wanted to ask my mom, hey, did you want to have a conversation with Claude, since I'm paying for it for 1 month, to see if we could get into some interesting convos? She said, sure. So we got Claude up and running, and basically what we did was that we just started asking different questions, and since this was like a personal matter, I'm not going to get into what that was. Now, was it like personal on like a family level? No, it was more so on like a thinking about society and like potential like things like biometrics and how that might play into future buying and selling, things like that. But it was a really long and in-depth conversation with the robot. I remember my sister came in and she was telling us about how this is exactly what she's been talking about, and that what the robot is saying. And then she wanted us to stop talking and have a conversation about Agenda 2030 and potential of 11-minute cities and no one owning anything and big corporations forcing people in to be subservient in order to maintain consistent profits, which honestly, based on how things are going with the housing crisis and how no one can afford owning a home anymore, seems like a very likely scenario, which is a shame. Now, after we had that conversation, we just continued to go on and talk with Claude more until eventually we were satisfied with our conversation, and then me and my mom discussed it, and then I needed to use the restroom, so I did that, and then when I went out, we discussed it even more, and I even showed her a video of Boston Dynamics with their new robot that they want to roll out to industrial use. So yeah, that's pretty spooky seeing that stuff. They say they want to have it take on a lot of jobs, and what that basically means is cheap, plentiful labor for the big CEOs and companies, and not a lot of labor and consistent income for the little guys. It does bring into question what potential future like that. What would be the end game for that? Like, obviously the rich people will be fine because they'll just have mountains of money to protect them in case, like, you know, the economy gets funky or whatever. But when it comes to the people who are just living paycheck to paycheck, how are they gonna, you know, survive in a situation where a robot can easily replace you? It certainly creates a really uncertain and troubling atmosphere for the future of blue-collar workers in everywhere in the whole world, honestly, since this technology seems like it's going to roll out to global audiences, specifically global corporate audiences. Yeah, it's never been a more uncertain time to be human than this current point in history. That is for sure. But, anywho, enough doom and gloom. My mom wanted help with cleaning the sides of the pool. So I scrubbed the sides of the pool for 10 minutes. When I was done with that, I decided to go and listen to a Digital Foundry video as I was scrubbing the pool about how the reaction to the new technology DLSS5, basically the nuclear fallout after the initial video was released of DLSS5, because when Richard Ledbetter and John Oliver had that initial reaction and released that video to the public, the video was immediately met with massive backlash and just mountains of negativity. Like, people in the comments section said, like, oh, you guys are shills, this is absolutely disgusting, we hate generative AI, it's going to take the jobs of artists, it's going to destroy the concept of strong art direction. Basically just constant negative talking point after constant negative talking point. And so this video they released, a Q&A on DLSS5, was, I think, their way of attempting to clean the air or clear the air, not clean the air. That was ridiculous. Clear the air, and try to let people know, hey guys, we were just invited to this event. We, didn't know what we were going to experience when we saw it. We were genuinely taken aback by the impressive potential of the technology. And it seems like this is just the way things are going to go moving forward, where we apply neural technology to video game graphics to allow for more realistic, believable shading and lighting and things like that. But the problem with a lot of the demos was that a lot of the faces looks like everyone had an Instagram beauty filter on and had hero lighting on their face, which definitely seemed to mess with the art direction. Isn't it weird how, like, this age of, like, oncoming artificial intelligence, originally people thought it was just going to take, like, all the work no one wanted, like, plumbing or, grocery stores or things like that. And people would be given the freedom to instead, do art or write or explore their minds, things like that. But ironically, the exact opposite is true, where manual labor, since robots aren't exactly being mass produced or affordable to companies yet, are not able to do the manual labor currently, unless it's like auto shop, like Hyundai. So instead, the technology is being used for white collar work, which ironically was the cushy like office job work that you could reliably study, get a degree for, get a certificate for, immediately get hired, and then slowly work your way up that ladder until you got a nice position where you'd get a good paycheck and reliable work and income consistently. But with the rise of how this artificial intelligence and how it essentially uses vast, multi-language models and is able to understand like human speech and then be implemented to do things like coding and, analysis and things like that. And of course, with the oncoming inevitability of things like quantum computing, which potentially, if that's mixed with artificial intelligence, could create the super intelligence that's constantly being warned about. It doesn't look good for the short-term future of humanity now, does it? It would appear that a lot of the people, the last batch of humans who were able to get into the cushy white-collar jobs to train these models and to get them where they're at now, and get people hired on to help direct and program these models, or not program, but actually grow them, because the way the AI technology works is it's not directly coded or programmed where it's like knowing a car and each component. No, it's basically like planting a seed and starts simple as like a single cell, and then it grows into another cell and more cells until eventually it's like a complex tree with multiple roots and different functionalities. It's basically what AI is. So there's no way to really predict or know how it will act or how it will affect our world, and that's a really scary thought, not gonna lie. Not having control over something that a humanity created is just scary. Don't like it. But anyways, yeah, I kind of got off on a tangent, didn't I? The video was essentially Oliver McKenzie and Richard Oliver McKenzie and Alex Battaglia all having a conversation about DLSS5. The basic gist was that Oliver still seemed quite impressed with the technology, but also Richard Ledbetter did seem impressed. They both did state that there were lead-ups to this technology eventually being disclosed to the public, and that this is essentially the way things will be going forward, because now, shaders are no longer being added to newer GPUs, and now it'll be neural networks that will be the primary focus for future GPUs going forward, which means that future GPUs will be heavily AI driven and focused, essentially meaning that a lot of new games that will eventually come out will probably use neural networks to create realistic graphical fidelity in video games rather than just raw computing. The only problem is it's still highly impractical because the technology requires two RTX 5090s in order to pull off anyways. But I'm sure given time, when eventually they can optimize for the 50 series and then release the 60 series, and then that will be able to bear the full brunt of work on those neural networks. It'll pretty much be a done deal by then that this technology will be here to stay. So there's probably going to be two camps, and one camp might be smaller and one camp might be larger, A smaller camp is the camp that adopts it and open-heartedly accepts it as the norm immediately. And then you'll have the other camp, which is currently the larger camp, that finds it absolutely detestable because it's going against the creative vision of the people who created the games that the people play, and it's just like it seems like it's making a mockery of gaming as a medium instead of respecting gaming as an art form. So because instead of adhering to the original artistic intent that the creators of the game wanted it to have, instead they're putting, like, grafting realistic looking assets on things that may or may not have had those realistic assets in mind when they were originally being developed for, which is a shame. Yeah, Alex Batali essentially shared similar opinions to a lot of the naysayers out there, that his specific comment about like how Grace in Resident Evil Requiem was supposed to look like, forlorn and unprepared because in the opening scene she's not supposed to have makeup on her face because she's going to the apartment where her mother sadly passed, and of course you're not going to beautify yourself on your way to see the crime scene of your mom. You're going to get there as soon as possible because you're worried about and scared, and you just want to know what happened because someone you deeply care about is now no longer alive. But in the new NVIDIA DLSS5 version, they make her look like, oh no, my mom's dead. Oh, but first let me put on some makeup and some eyelashes and some blush before I go. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. So, and I will say, when I first saw the technology, I admit I was impressed by it. I thought it looked really interesting. And I thought the lighting looked pretty good. A lot of people in the comments say that the lighting, the blacks, like shadows and things like that, look crushed, and that like the color correction is just way off. I don't know. I saw like the way like the lighting looked in DLSS5 footage. It looked pretty compelling to my eye. The only thing that wasn't compelling was the weird uncanniness of like what looked to be realistic looking human faces with realistic pores superimposed on these video game characters with really static like movement on their faces. So that was a weird disconnect, I will admit. But the actual environments and lighting, the thing you're going to be looking at most of the time when you're playing a video game looked pretty good to my eyes. But I guess I'm the exception rather than the rule because most people did not find it appealing at all. So yeah. Anywho, I think I've gone on long enough about this whole thing. But yeah, it was interesting hearing their different talking points and seeing them talk about this. I definitely did get a strong vibe that Richard and Oliver were completely blindsided and shell-shocked about the negative reaction that this immediately got. And like even Richard Ledbetter, for the first time in Digital Foundry history, cursed like when he was reading off a comment about like, the inevitable poop storm of something that we didn't anticipate. So yeah, it was yeah, definitely quite an experience. Well, anyways, after listening to that while doing the pool and then coming inside to the house, I got in a conversation with my sister about trying to be better at self-improvement with my time management skills. I'm not really good at time management right now at work in terms of like, okay, I need to be here, I need to do that. So we were talking through a little game plan to find a solution to that so I could be better equipped. And then suddenly out of nowhere, all of our electricity went off. Like there was no, just everything, the microwave, the TV, everything. And I tried to contact the company that powers our technology, the electric grid, and I kept on getting automated phone calls from a virtual assistant, and then it took me forever until I eventually finally got to a representative, who was a man who obviously seemed like he was just reading off of a list of the things that you're told to read off of when someone calls in about like a situation or an outage. So he talked about, oh, did you make sure your breakers weren't busted, or did you turn it on and off, or did you make sure it wasn't just your house but your neighbor's house, things like that. And I know why they do that, but I feel like that's such like a by the books internal way of doing things. Clearly he was just didn't really know what was going on. He was just someone to be given quick instructions to give the person calling that you could have easily gotten online. If you're going through the effort of calling someone, you'd expect them to have a more dynamic way of helping you deal with a problem. Like, okay, we're in this area. Power went out. What happened with the power? Why is it not working? But instead, it just felt so inorganic and by the books, if that makes sense. It's kind of a shame. But anywho, eventually the power did go back on, so that was nice. And then it was time for me to get dressed and ready and go to work. So I did all of that. I got up and I left. And eventually I arrived at work. And when I got there, I got out of my car and sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second there. When I got I got out of my car. When I got into work, I punched in. I checked the schedule immediately. From what I remember, the schedule was pretty much sweeps the whole day. Yeah, just whole day sweeps. So I immediately went to do my duties. Standard practice: sweep produce, sweep break room, sweep the store floor, help customers if they needed items, take out orders, because I was one of the other people that was trained on taking out orders, and every now and then bagging for customers. And that pretty much sums it up. Anything interesting? No, just had a good attitude, and it was very nice and friendly to the customers, and did my best to stay positive and have a good outlook on things. Well, anyways, after my first 2 hours, I went on my break, where I decided to spend that break getting some junk food. I decided to get some Skinny Pop Harry Potter Butterbeer popcorn. I got the 2 for $6 deal, because if you buy one, it's like $5, so you might as well get the other one for $1 more. I'm sure you probably shouldn't get more of 2 of anything, A, because it's unhealthy, and B, you don't know if you're gonna like it. but I thought, hey, might as well give it a shot. So yeah, I got that. I even got Skittles freezer dried Skittles, sour Skittles. They were something like that. And what else? I remember. What did I have? Oh yeah, and this Mexican candy that was like basically like candy spaghetti, but with like a sauce that you could pour on it. Like I forget the name of the sauce, but I got all that, basically a bunch of junk food for my first break, and then I went upstairs and I tried the spaghetti first, because that looked pretty good to me. And yeah, it scratched my candy spaghetti itch, especially with that spicy sweet tang of the sauce that came with it. However, one thing that I thought was a little weird about it was that when the sauce was on my skin and I immediately washed it off after finishing eating, the sauce kind of stained my skin for like a really long time. Like, I don't know, like it looks like my hands are like no longer, have any sauce on them, but it was the skin on my hands were stained for the longest time. It was crazy. The Harry Potter butterbeer popcorn from Skinny Pop, I had that. It was I mean, if you've ever had what do you call that? Popcorn, kettle corn. It's pretty much kettle corn. I guess the biggest difference is that maybe there's a slight tint of a butterbeer flavor of some kind. Kind of hard to quantify what that even would taste like. I guess caramelly. Yeah, but overall, it didn't really blow me away. It was good. It was like satisfyingly sweet and crispy, and it had a good hint of flavor. But overall, it wasn't the flavor shock that I was really expecting, I guess. And then I had the freeze dried sour Skittles, which were extremely crispy. It was basically just flavored sugar crystal crunches. You're basically just eating pure sugar. It's pretty insane. Tasted good though, but definitely not something you should be eating every day. I really only did this because I kind of was in the mood to just eat whatever today. So that's why I did it. So I had that. And then I returned back to work, did some sweeps. I remember as I was doing my sweeps, I was like, oh, I want those addictive snack foods again. Like, I was really, like, looking forward to the opportunity to have that again. Yeah, pretty crazy. Until eventually I finally arrived on my lunch break. I decided to make this the last lunch break where I would be eating out for a while. The reason why I'd been eating out so much in my previous work days pretty much boils down to the fact that I turned in bottles and cans to the recycling center. I got like a good chunk of cash, and I pretty much used all that cash to eat out for like an entire week. It was, I guess, my reward to myself for sticking to recycling. But now the recycling cash has run dry, and financially it makes the most sense to bring my own food and just eat there. Save on gas, and it be cheaper just overall. So I'm gonna do that for a while, at least until my funds aren't as well, they're not bad. I still have good funds. It's just, I want them to grow, so yeah. Anywho, Moving along, I eventually punched out for lunch, and I went to a burger place, had burger, fries. I was continuing to watch the Digital Foundry video because I didn't finish it about the whole DLSS5 thing. I broke everything down that I stated earlier in the video where I learned, so I don't need to repeat myself here. After I was done with my extra crispy fries, my double cheeseburger, my Diet Pepsi. Before I left, I filled the soda with Diet Pepsi and then topped it off a bit with Dr. Pepper because I like Dr. Pepper. And then I went off into back into work, where I spent the first hour back wiping down all the check stands because that actually takes me the longest time to do. So I was able to just get that out of the way first. So I was able to stay out of schedule. I then was able to begin taking out all the trash, and I threw it all out. So that felt really good, except for the office trash, which I ended up throwing out at the very end of the day. But we'll get to that. And then I stacked 3 paper bag not boxes, they're more like paper bag wrapped bags next to each other on a U-boat, and was walking over to the front so I could stack those paper bags in the check stand so they'd be ready for tomorrow. But here's where things get cheesy, and by that I mean when I was pushing the U-boat, I accidentally rubbed up against a box that held a bunch of cheese dips, and then it fell, and then a cheese dip glass bottle broke. So I had to clean up the mess, throw away the broken cheese bottle, or, jar. Yeah, that ate up so much time. If it weren't for that, I would have been able to get all of my duties done very quickly, immediately, but that was the stifling point that held me back. That, and I forgot to take out the office trash, which, yeah. But I did ask one of my coworkers for help by asking if they could push the carts and signs into the store, which they agreed to. So that was cool. Really appreciate that. But yeah, I wiped down check stand 3, 4 after the store closed. I threw out the trash, office trash and the cheese trash outside, and then I said goodbye and goodnight to one of my co-bosses as we were walked out. And then I drove off home. When I arrived, and I said goodbye to my coworkers as well. Drove off home. When I arrived at home, I greeted my mom. She told me there was some sushi waiting for me in the fridge, so I got the sushi, and I connected my earbuds to my to the television wirelessly, and I decided to watch another Digital Foundry video where they were discussing the new PSS R2 implementation in Alan Wake 2 and how much of a game changer and improvement the technology is compared to the previous one. And they were showing side-by-side footage, and yeah, I have to agree, it does look quite impressive. Yeah, and I had the more of the Harry Potter popcorn, as well as the Skittles, freezer-dried Skittles. And I had them mixed together, measured in a bowl to be the exact specific, serving size. And then I had six slices of sushi. A&W, zero sugar. I greeted my sister. There was a new video that was released by AI in Context, a YouTube channel that goes over the potential pitfalls that AI may introduce in the near future that should be alarming and concerning to anyone who is paying attention to this developing technology. We watched the first 14 minutes before my sister started to fall asleep, so I turned off and said we could check out the rest later because I thought it was very interesting. So she went to sleep. I decided to get out Claude and ask to help me make a production schedule for my Brain Jam and Brain Jam Extra YouTube channel because I've been neglecting that for the last 19 going on 20 days, right? Wait, what day is it? Is it sorry. Oh yeah, it's 19th. So for the last 19 days. Not feeling great about that, but I feel like maybe it was my body's way of telling me to take a break and to reconsider and figure out a better way of approaching this production of this. So yeah, I felt like I had a pretty good session with Claude on that. I even printed out the paper it wrote down so I could use as a inspiration for helping me out with creating good time blocks to get my deep work done. And then after that, I listened to some Preston Dennett where he was talking about encounters with aliens. I guess the most interesting thing that I heard from that was there was a Mexican doctor who supposedly made contact with a being in his office who said he was 80 years old, but he had really smooth looking skin and looked really vibrant and young, but was completely bald and had really bright skin. It was pretty interesting. I was talking about how the governments, they know about us, and we collude with them, but we're not going to step out and reveal ourselves because that we don't want to freak anyone out, so we just want to slowly roll out so we don't shake your worlds too much, things like that. I take these stories with a grain of salt, but it is fun to hear them. I mean, part of you hopes ooh, maybe there's a shred of truth here, but another part of you is this is probably someone telling a tall tale, but regardless, it is interesting to listen to. Anywho. But yeah, then I took my vitamins, I brushed my teeth, I took some mouthwash, need to use the restroom again. After I was done with that, I took a second bout of mouthwash. And then I went to my room. I decided to watch a video about the Where the Wind Blows cartoon. I was a guy who did a quick review of it, and it made me want to watch a longer form review that was a contrast between the original graphic novel and the movie. It's a really depressing movie. You don't know where the wind blows. It's basically a film about an elderly couple that have complete and total trust of their government and think that if they follow the exact protocol, everything will be fine, and that they have a really innocent and rose-tinted view of war, and they don't really understand how serious things are. And so when the problems stare them in the face and they just kind of brush it off as minor inconveniences instead of treating them as the deathly serious situations that they are in, being around after a nuclear blast that takes out their entire countryside, it ultimately ends up becoming the end of their fate, and it's one of the most heartbreaking and depressing and sad movies you will ever watch, because it's just this elderly couple that doesn't really know what's actually going on. They just assume that if they just blindly follow and trust what their government tells them, that things will be okay, but in reality, things aren't okay, and they're just gonna die. So yeah, depressing but thought-provoking movie for sure. And I always like watching people talk about those kinds of movies on YouTube because it's just so interesting to see breakdowns and conversations that arise from this subject matter. Fascinates me. But after that, I decided to make this update video. And that's pretty much my day. Thanks for watching. I have the next 2 days off, so that's great. Definitely looking forward to that. And yeah, I'm gonna go to bed pretty soon. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody. Take care.